Or this also into the line to show how to detect the most last line and continue from the line. Consider this illustration. As we can see, different columns might have different last row, which means that the most last row might happen at any column. Therefore, our intention here is to detect the most last row by using VBA. Go to Developer tab, look for Visual Basic. I'm going to write the code in the current sheet 2. Always start by giving a name, for example, detect. What we need to do here is to make use of array to compare who's the last row. So we are going to define array first. Simply use any dummy. So for example, we have 4 columns here. So we are going to use array from 1 to 4 as period, for example. And we are going to set a dummy so that we can compare. I'm going to let a dummy b be equal to 0. The purpose of using this is because we are going to make use of comparison. For example, we are going to compare the last row number to column A to the previous column, and we check that who's have a higher row number, and hence it will be the last row. However, let's say we are currently at column A. If you want to compare to the previous, which means that we will reach an error here since we don't have the previous column. So this is the purpose of having dummy B. Next, we are going to make use of for loop for I equal to 1 to 4. So run from the column 1 to the last column. And we are going to check the row number. So when A1 is equal to, so we check sheet 2 dot cells. We are going to make use of the first row every time where we want to check for the last row, just like control arrow down key on the keyboard. So we have 1 I. We should fix the first cell, first row. So every time we just like control down to check for the last row, control down to check for the last row. So this is the purpose of having this. So we need to dot and XL down. So arrow down dot row. We are going to check for the row number. So we need dot row here. We need condition so that we know who has the highest row number. And then we can set it as the last row. So AI, of course, we compare to B. Every time we need to compare to B, let B be carried forward value so that we are able to detect the last row. So B is equal to AI. So as we can see, if let's say currently we have the value that is greater than the previous value, so which means that we should update the previous value to the current one so that we know that this is the last row. Or else, if let's say it's not greater, which means that it's smaller than the previous, then we should remain as previous, since the previous row number is greater. Start with if, and then we end with if. Complete the first I, we should continue to the next I. And then we can have the contain to be updated. So we are going to continue from the last row. So the last row here is B. What we need here is a new row. So we remember to plus 1 so that we continue from a fresh row. We can simply pick any column to continue since we don't have data here. So I'm going to use continue from the most last line. If we have data, then we can make use of the data and we just update the row. Okay, now let's check the result. So when we click on run, as we can see, we will continue from the most last row. How let's say we change the most last row. For example, we delete 3 rows from column A, and suppose the most last line should be here. If we run for click on run and check, as we can see, still correct. So we check again, we change again with delete and run again. So will still be correct. Oh, let's say we have one column where only one row, the first row is being used. or only the first row contain content. If we run, as we can see, we will reach an error. This is because just like when we use Excel, when we press Control down, as we can see, we will reach the maximum number of rows that Excel can take. So let's say we want to start from a new row, of course cannot, since this is already the maximum. So this is an error that we should take care. To overcome this issue, we can add another condition. We are going to add here. So if the row that we have, sheet1.cells 1 I is empty, because we might have two reasons that the Excel will reach the last row, the maximum possible last row. So when we press Control down, we will reach the last row, which is 1,048,576. Or when we have empty cell, when we go down, we'll reach the maximum possible cell as well. So what we have to do here is we need to have two conditions. One is when the first row is empty and we reach the last row, the last possible maximum row, or we have contained in the first row, but we still reach the maximum last row. So 1,048,576. If let's say this number is not correct, we can check by ourselves. We just have to press Ctrl and down key on the keyboard to check for the maximum last row that the Excel can take. AI should be equal to 0. Assume that since this is empty and we reach the last possible row, which means that we have empty row, so we should set to 0. And else if we are going to copy first so that we don't have to type. Else if we change to not empty. Instead of using empty, of course, we can use the quotation mark to stands for empty. Depends which one we prefer. But we still reach the last possible row. That means that we have one row being used, which is the first row. Start with if and we end with if. And now we check the result. So when we run, no more error as we can see here. So if let's say we delete everything that we have here, we run and see what happened. So Excel will still be able to detect the workbook is empty. So we are able to start from the new line. Now let's say we have one cell on the first row at column B. Let's run. So when we run, we will still continue from the correct line. Okay, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope you like this. See you.